Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names can never hurt me. I see some of you mouthing that phrase. How many of you remember hearing or even saying those words when you were a child on the playground or in the schoolyard? We said it. Yeah, see, I see hands. We said it because we didn't want others to know that our feelings were hurt when they called us a name or said something unkind to us. But the truth of the matter is, name calling hurts. Words cause harm. Our words either build up or they tear down. They can heal or they can hurt. During this month of September, our worship series has been titled Living Faith, living out our faith, and it's based on the book of James. Now, the book of James is a letter that was written to the early church by James, the brother of Jesus. And it's not a very heady book, if you will. It's not a book that's full of deep theological concepts or telling us how to believe. It's a practical book that offers us wisdom and guidance on how we should live and how we should act, what we should say. For James, faith is a verb. Faith is a verb. It requires action. Faith requires action. Today's readings are from chapter 3. So last 2 weeks we looked at James 1 and James 2, and today we're looking at James 3. And the first few verses of this chapter focus on the role and the responsibility of teachers. And it could be not just teachers, Christian teachers, it could be pastors, leaders. And what we say about God in public is given a lot of weight. If teachers or pastors or any church leader really is misdirecting people, they're doing harm. They're doing harm. And so it's important for teachers and preachers and other leaders to put time and thought and prayer into what they say, giving their very best to that public ministry of the word. False teaching in churches can do great harm. It's not a job for any of us to take lightly. When James admonishes that many should not become teachers, he's highlighting the importance of humility. Humility. Meaning, be honest. We don't all have it figured out. Yes, we all do make mistakes. And if we do recognize that what we say matters, and we recognize the potential harm of our words, then we can move forward with and in humility. It's related to what we talked about last week, that connection, or that the connection between personal holiness and social holiness. The words that we speak as individuals, especially as leaders or teachers or pastors, they don't just stay with us. They have an impact, a social impact. In verses 5 through 12, then, James moves on from talking about the speech of teachers or other leaders to just talking about words and the words that we say in general. And he's pretty direct. He doesn't mince words. He says, control your tongue. Control your tongue. Now, James isn't the only writer in the whole biblical canon to give this command or instruction, if you will. Proverbs is chock full of these little nuggets. Like in chapter 21, verse 23, it says, those who guard their mouths and their tongues guard themselves from trouble. The book of Psalms also has some great little nuggets in there, like 34:13 that says, then you must keep your tongue from evil and keep your lips from speaking lies. And Paul writes in his letter to the church in Ephesus, Ephesians 4:29, he says, do not let any foul words come out of your mouth. Only say what is helpful when it is needed. What is helpful when it is needed for the building up of the community so that it benefits those who hear what you say. Even James has a lot to say about what we say. Jesus has a lot to say about what we say. In Matthew, Jesus tells us that it's not what goes into our mouths, talking about all things that might defile our bodies. It's not what goes into our mouths that defile us, but the words that come out of them. Not what goes in, what we eat or whatever, it's what comes out, the words that come out of our mouths. Clearly, the Bible understands this universal truth about our human condition. Our human condition, the way we are as human beings. Our tongues need controlling. Our tongues need taming. We have to watch what we say. And James is pretty unique in the vividness of the language that he uses. And he uses all of this flair to make his point. Much like his brother Jesus did in using ordinary language or ordinary objects that the people could understand when Jesus taught in parables, James uses these word pictures to illustrate the power of words. He says, the tongue is like a small bit that can bridle even the wildest horse. It's like a small rudder that can determine the course of a giant sea vessel. A small spark that can set off a blazing fire. A tiny bit of poison that can cause great harm. And a toxic mixture of salt and fresh water that can destroy life. He's got some pretty vivid verbal flourish there in his book. And he certainly offers us some creative spins, if you will, in talking about the power of the tongue, the power of the words that we say. James's words about our words are very clear. We can praise God on Sunday, come to work and work to church and singing God's praise. Work for me more than maybe for you. We come to church singing God's praise, and then on Monday we say hurtful things about other people. Those people who are all made in the image and the likeness of God. The same God that we were praising. Or we can say things that sound nice and then act in a way that contradicts our words or simply just fails to live up to those words. There's a deep sense of hypocrisy because of this. The same mouth should not be blessing and cursing. The same mouth should not be blessing and cursing. John Wesley, who was the founder of our United Methodist movement, or the Methodist movement at that time, outlined some general rules that he gave for the people who would gather to, quote, work out their salvation. And these general rules are still part of our United Methodist Book of Discipline today. And I know that this church has done this study in the past. About 20 years ago or so, Bishop Reuben Job published a little book called 3 Simple Rules that's based on these Wesleyan teachings. And as Wesley taught, and as he grew and empowered those Methodist societies that gathered, he said, "It is therefore expected of all who continue therein that they should continue to evidence their desire of salvation, first, by doing no harm, and by avoiding evil of every kind." Doing no harm and by avoiding evil of every kind. That first rule is to do no harm. Part of doing no harm is not just about our actions. We talked about actions last week. It's not just about our actions toward other people, but also our words. And having our words and our actions say the same thing. Our words and our actions must be aligned. Wesley gives some examples. For instance, he says that we should avoid uncharitable or unprofitable conversation. Avoiding uncharitable or unprofitable conversation, particularly speaking evil, he says, of magistrates and ministers, but of anybody. Uncharitable or unprofitable conversation. Think about that. Have you ever engaged in uncharitable or unprofitable conversation? In person? Or on social media? As I watched the presidential debate that happened last Tuesday night, I watched the whole thing and all of the commentary afterwards. I spent a lot of time thinking and reflecting on uncharitable and unprofitable conversation and the power of our words. Wesley taught that as our salvation bears fruit, or it produces goodness in the world, it should change the way we talk about people. It should change the way we talk to people. We need to pay attention to how we talk in civil discourse. That's kind of a misnomer in itself, civil discourse. How we express our opinions, how we listen to others with different viewpoints. When we simply complain or we insult our opponents, it just shuts down the conversation. It shuts it down. What if between now and election day, we consciously chose the words that we use for the candidate that we're going to vote for and for the candidate that we plan not to vote for? What if between now and election day, we consciously chose the words that we say, we constantly choose the words that we say and use for the people who are decidedly voting for the candidate that we don't want? What would happen if all of us decided to consciously use words that build up and heal, not words that harm or tear down or destroy? In a sermon a few years ago, I shared the acronym THINK, T-H-I-N-K, think, with all of you. It's something, you can see it up on the screen, it's in your bulletins. It's something that makes its rounds on social media periodically. And I want you to take a look at it. Those watching online, to look at the picture. Those here in person, look at your bulletin or at the screen. In all of our interactions with other people, we should think before we speak, so that we don't cause harm, intentionally or unintentionally. We must use our words wisely. And so, using this word, think, here are some questions that we should ask ourselves. For T, is it true? Is it true? Where did the information that I am about to share come from? Where did that information come from? Is it from a reliable source? Or was it from some meme on the internet? Do I know for certain? Am I sure that what I am about to say is true? Is it true? H, is it helpful? Is it helpful? Do I really need to say this thing? Will it help the person, or am I only saying it because I have an axe to grind, or I want to insult the person, prove that I'm right? Is it helpful? I, is it inspiring? Is it inspiring? Is what I am going to say going to help this person, or am I just talking to hear myself talk? Because I think that what I have to say is so good. Is it inspiring? N, is it necessary? Is it necessary? Do I really have to say this thing, and do I have to say it right now in this moment? Is it something that this person really needs to hear? Is it necessary? And K, is it kind? Is it kind? Is what I'm about to say mean-spirited? Is what I'm going to say going to build this person up or tear them down? Is it kind? If we made a practice, just the small group of us who are here gathered in this place and watching online, if we, just this small group, made a practice of asking ourselves these questions before we opened our mouths, there would be a lot less harm in the world. Or at least right here in our own little corner of the world. James tells us that our tongues need taming. Our words can get us and can get others into trouble. This is particularly true in the midst of these divisive times leading up to the election. And so I want to make an intentional commitment to think before I speak, to do no harm. What about you? What about all of us? Our psalm today closed with that verse that I often pray at the end of a prayer before I preach. It's a very familiar verse. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Is that our prayer? Is that our prayer? That our words would be acceptable or pleasing to God? As Ephesians 4:29 says, do not let any foul words come out of your mouth. Only say what is helpful when it is needed for the building up of the community, so that it benefits those who hear what you say. Let's commit together. Let's commit to do no harm.